Welcome back to the English Learning Podcast on YouTube. This is episode 4, and we are so glad you're here. We are making this series to help you learn English in a fun and engaging way. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the future episodes. Today, we are taking a deep dive into a pivotal moment in history, World War I. Not only will we be learning some new English vocabulary, but we will also uncover the events that led to this global conflict.
What's fascinating about World War I is that it wasn't just a single event that caused it. It's more like a tangled web of underlying causes where different factors
Intertwined.
to create the perfect storm.
Okay, so it wasn't just one cause, but multiple causes coming together. It sounds like we're talking about cause and effect, right?
Exactly. In this context, cause refers to the reasons behind something. And with World War I, historians point to a bunch of different causes: nationalism, alliances, imperialism, and militarism.
These causes are like different pieces of a puzzle, each contributing to the bigger picture. But wasn't there a specific event, a trigger, that finally set everything off?
Absolutely. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in Sarajevo back in June of 1914 is seen as the spark that ignited this already tense situation in Europe.
Wow, so this one assassination acted like a catalyst, setting off this chain reaction. That ultimately led to war. It's incredible how seemingly isolated events can have such massive ripple effects.
It really shows how interconnected global events are, and how actions in one place can have far-reaching consequences. And once the war began, one of its defining features was the emergence of trench warfare.
I've always been curious about trench warfare. From what I've read, it sounds incredibly brutal. Can you paint a picture of what it was like for the soldiers?
Imagine being stuck in these long, narrow ditches, often filled with mud, and incredibly unsanitary. These trenches stretched for miles along what was known as the Western Front, leading to a prolonged stalemate where neither side could make much progress.
Stalemate. That word sounds familiar. It doesn't mean a situation where things are at a standstill. Kind of like when two sides in a debate can't agree.
Precisely. It's a situation where neither side can gain an advantage or make any significant headway. And the conditions endured by the soldiers in the trenches were horrendous. Disease was rampant, food was scarce, and the constant threat of enemy fire made it a living nightmare.
It's heartbreaking to think about the physical and psychological toll. That trench warfare must have taken on the soldiers.
It wasn't just the tactics that led to the stalemate, but also the technology of the time. New weapons, like machine guns and artillery, made it incredibly difficult for either side to break through the enemy lines.
So even with all their strategic planning, the new technology ultimately led to this deadlock. Were there any attempts to break free from the trenches?
Absolutely. There were several major offensives launched by both sides, but they often resulted in heavy casualties and little territorial gain.
It sounds like a brutal back and forth, with both sides suffering heavy losses. It's hard to imagine. The sense of relief when the war finally ended, when did that happen?
World War I officially ended on November 11th, 1918, with the signing of an armistice.
Armistice, that's a word we don't hear every day. What does it mean exactly?
An armistice is essentially an agreement to stop fighting. It's not a peace treaty in itself, but a formal cessation of hostilities. In many countries, November 11th is commemorated as Armistice Day, or Veterans Day, to remember the sacrifices made during the war.
So it's a day to reflect on the immense human cost of war and honor those who served. But an armistice is just a pause in the fighting.
Right.
What about a formal peace treaty?
Right. The Treaty of Versailles was signed in 1919. This treaty officially ended the war and set the terms of peace. However, it also had some controversial aspects that would have long-lasting consequences.
What do you mean by controversial?
Well, the treaty imposed harsh penalties on Germany, including significant territorial losses and hefty financial reparations. This created resentment and economic hardship in Germany, which many believe contributed to the rise of extremism and the eventual outbreak of World War II.
So the Treaty of Versailles, while intended to prevent future conflicts, may have actually laid the groundwork for another war. It's a reminder that the decisions made in the aftermath of one conflict can have a ripple effect for generations to come.
That's a great point. The Treaty of Versailles really highlights how interconnected history is and how decisions made in the past can have a profound impact on the future.
Speaking of decisions and their impact, we've learned a lot about the causes and consequences of World War I today, but I'm curious, what do you think? Is it most enduring legacy? How did it shape the world as we know it today?
That's a great question, and one that historians continue to debate. World War I left behind a complex legacy with both positive and negative aspects. The war led to significant advancements in technology and medicine, but it also contributed to the rise of totalitarian regimes, and as we've seen, the outbreak of another devastating world war.
It's fascinating to think about how an event that happened over a century ago still has such a profound impact on our world today.
Absolutely. History may not repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Understanding the past can help us navigate the present and shape a better future.
Before we wrap up our deep dive into World War I, let's recap some of the key vocabulary we've learned today. We talked about cause and effect, which are crucial for understanding the origins of the war. We explored the concept of stalemate, which characterized much of the fighting on the Western Front. And we also learned about armistice and treaty, which marked the end of the war, but also set the stage for future challenges.
These words are not only useful for understanding history, but they also have everyday applications. You could ask someone, what caused this traffic jam? Or say, the long meeting ended in a stalemate.
That's a great point. Learning new vocabulary not only expands our knowledge, but also helps us express ourselves more effectively.
Exactly, and when we can connect new words to real-world examples and historical events, it makes them much more memorable and meaningful.
Well, on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into World War I. A big thank you to all our viewers for joining us on this journey.
It was a pleasure exploring this pivotal moment in history with you.
Don't forget to like this episode, share it with your fellow English learners, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating deep dives into history, culture, and language.
We'll be back with another exciting episode soon.
Until then, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those English skills sharp. It's amazing how these words from a historical event are still so relevant in our daily lives.
Absolutely. Language is a powerful tool, and understanding its nuances can enrich our understanding of the world around us.
So true. Now, before we let our listeners go, I want to leave them with something to think about. We've talked about the causes and consequences of World War I. But what do you think? Is its most enduring legacy? What impact did it have on the world that we still see today? Maybe this is something you can ponder as you continue your English learning journey.
That's an excellent question, and one that historians continue to debate. It's a complex legacy, with both positive and negative aspects, for example. The war led to significant advancements in technology and medicine, but it also contributed to the rise of totalitarian regimes and the outbreak of another devastating world war.
Wow, so much to think about. A big thank you to all of our viewers for joining us on this deep dive into World War I. Don't forget to like this episode, share it with your fellow English learners, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating deep dives into history, culture, and language. We'll see you in our next episode.